All right.
Mr. Nelson, I need to swear you in, so would you raise your right hand?
Shall I stand or?
You can sit.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Yes. Your name, sir?
My name is Brad Nelson.
And your job with Pima County is what, sir?
I am the elections director for Pima County.
And you're saying, when did you start as election director?
Bill, that's the background you've already gone over, so that's in your prior depositions.
Right. So when did you?
Bill, the judge said that you can do new stuff, you can't do stuff you've done before. You've done all that before. I've read your depositions yesterday and the day before. That's in them. So can we go to new topics?
What have you read prior to coming here today for your deposition? What documents have you read in preparation for the deposition?
I've read some of the previous depositions that I've performed, and the 4 reports that I believe you offered from the University of Connecticut. I believe that's it.
Do you believe you have read all of your prior depositions?
Yes.
And that would be including the deposition that, the 30B6 deposition where you appeared on behalf of Pima County?
I'm not certain of that reference number.
What date's that, Bill?
Yeah.
I believe it's August 24th, 2007.
That one I'm unfamiliar with. I have a November 7th of 2007 and a February 28th of 2007.
In a prior deposition, if I can paraphrase you, I believe you said you had a rudimentary understanding of the GEMS computer system.
That's correct.
Since you answered those questions and characterized the extent of your knowledge at that time as rudimentary, what have you done to increase your knowledge and understanding of the computer software used in Pima County?
I would say my understanding has changed very minor as the cases were going on pertaining to databases. I became familiar with some terminologies, MDB, GBF, things of that nature, but to say that I have a better understanding of GEMS, no.
Do you have a better understanding of the security defects in GEMS?
Could you elaborate on what you mean by security defects?
Okay. Let's back up a little further then. What do you know about the security issues with GEM software that the election department would need to be aware of in order to take measures to have a good election without someone taking advantage of the security defects?
And Bill, you're talking about information that he's gained since you discussed this with him on February 28th, 2007.
Excuse me?
You're talking about information he's gained subsequent to your discussion with him about this topic on February 28th, 2007? because you talked to him about that, starting at page 13 of that deposition then.
Okay.
So you're talking about information he's obtained since then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly, the Secretary of State's procedurals manual has changed in various editions since that time. And in a broad sense, regardless of the election management system a county or jurisdiction may be using, there has been a change, and I would suggest an enhancement of security protocols within the Arizona State Arizona State Elections Procedures Manual.
Do those changes relate to security issues concerning GEM software?
I would suggest that it talks about elections management software because GEMS is not the only elections management software used within the state of Arizona. So to say that it specifically talks about GEMS, the answer is no.
What are the security issues it deals with?
Predominantly, it talks about the necessity to maintain security around the software as meaning GEMS. Its access to it, as well as memory cards, and all of the systems, regardless of whether it's a GEM system or not, use some type of memory card within the state of Arizona. Also talks about access to the counting room where ballots will actually be counted, things of that nature.
It in 2006, your county made a number of security changes relating to the election computer. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And a good portion, or most of those, were through recommendations from the particularly the Democratic Party. Would that be correct?
I would suggest that it was equal between the Democratic Party as well as the Secretary of State and the county's IT department.
Has the Libertarian Party been active on election security issues?
Certainly the Libertarian Party was of great assistance during the first hand count audit that we performed. And there is a representative of the Libertarian Party on the Election Integrity Committee. Those are the two things that come to mind.
And are you speaking of Jim March, who's on the County Election Integrity Committee?
That is correct.
Yeah. And Mr. March was active, was he not, in 2006 on many of the various changes that you just spoke about?
Certainly he was part of the input on the process, yes.
You said that one of the change in the Secretary of State's manual related to the necessity of security access to software. And what do you mean by that?
One of the things that Pima County had been doing since that 2006 review that you mentioned, outside of the parameters of the Elections Procedures Manual, was doing hash codes and things of that nature to make sure that the software that had come to us was truly the same edition that had gone through the certification process. That's one of the things that I would suggest. The other is that it has to be certified each time, not just once, but before every election. A hash code of the software is performed and recorded and sent to the Secretary of State's office. So that's something new I would suggest.
Okay. And when were those put into the Can you hash the program code buried in the GEMS data files?
I'm going to object to form and foundation.
Shall I continue? Ron?
Yeah, answer if you can. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, would you restate the question?
Sure. Can you hash the program code buried in the GEMS data files?
I do not know the answer.
What do you know about hash codes?
My understanding is that it is, in a sense, a fingerprint that is a multi-digit and perhaps multi-charactered signature that if the software that one uses changes just one bit of information, there is a completely new multi-digit or multi-character hash code that comes out in that. So it's a comparison tool, if you will.
And who do you rely on in currently in your election department for technical information?
Are we still on the subject of hash codes?
Well, you could, sure, you could. I want in general, but certainly if you want to limit it to hash codes, and then we can expand the answer.
I was just wondering, since that's where the previous question had come from. So, the hash code is tested against what I believe NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology. I may have that acronym not quite right, but the hash code is there, and then separate from elections personnel, the hash code is actually done by county IT personnel that does the certification process.
Mr. Nelson, I believe my question was, who do you rely on for your hash code information and testing?
I beg your pardon, I did not give you a name. The gentleman's name is Mr. Bill Allaire, A-L-L-A-I-R-E.
And what is he an employee in the election department?
No, he is not.
And what department does he work for?
I believe he works in the county's information technology department.
But he is a full-time Pima County employee, is that
To
right?
my knowledge, yes.
And how long has he been working with your election department?
Certainly, I've only been with the county for a limited amount of time, but since 2006, he has assisted us.
Who else from the other county departments assists the election department that is not an election division employee?
Certainly on election day, there are what we call IT troubleshooters. These are ladies and gentlemen not from the elections department, but county employees who go out and assist the poll workers on election day with any equipment problems. And by equipment, I mean the scanners or the touchscreen voting devices. Depending upon the breadth of the election, whether it's countywide or a smaller size jurisdiction, there can be as few as 5 of those individuals or as many as 30 of those individuals.
Yeah. Okay, other than the IT troubleshooters, what other county technical employees, you've talked about election day, other than that?
Again, if we're speaking about election tabulation as opposed to payrolls and things of that nature?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that's probably right.
Okay. What's John Moffitt's role?
Well, certainly he is a member of the Election Integrity Commission as well. So he has the same observation powers, if you will, as any other particular person involved. He has also been involved, and certainly Mr. Moffitt can speak better to this than myself, but in a general fashion, I would say that he has been a great assistance to the political parties, the commission, the Board of Supervisors, and myself with his technological background from approximately 2006 till today.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand part of your answer. I thought you said that John Moffitt, as a member of the election commission had the same observation powers as who?
As the rest of the members of the commission. In other words,
And what observation powers do the members of the commission have?
certainly when there's an election in process, in other words, as the election is being counted, individuals from the Election Integrity Committee are invited as members of the public, media, candidates, things of that nature, are invited to come and watch the process.
And do they have powers and abilities greater than the political party appointed observers?
Well, certainly there is a logic and accuracy board that is appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and the two members on that board must be of different political parties. I would say those are the members who actually are part of the certification of the tabulation. So they are much more involved, the logic and accuracy board, than other members. So I would say that candidates do not have the same observation powers, if you will, as those two particular individuals.
My question was, do the members of the county election commission have the same observation powers as political party appointed observers?
The members of the Election Integrity Commission are political party appointed observers, so I'm not certain what to tell you.
No, I'm gonna just object. I don't care if he's here as long as he's silent, but
Sorry.
if he starts talking, I'm gonna have a problem.
I'm sorry. My bad.
And by the way, who are you?
Jim March.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I didn't get what you said on the
Well,
record.
He really shouldn't be
Well,
saying
no,
anything
I
on the record.
shouldn't have said anything. Mental lapse.
He said not all of them are.
Mr. Nelson, do the political parties in Pima County have observers during the appointed observers during the tabulation of ballots, the handling of ballots, to the entire election procedures?
Yes.
And these political parties tell you who their observers are, don't they?
Yes.
And so you know this person is an observer from the Democratic Party at that election, or the Republican Party, or the Libertarian Party.
Yes.
And those persons may or may not be individuals who happen to be on this county election committee. Would that be true?
That is true.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So back to my question. Those appointed political party observers have certain abilities to observe during the election process, do they not?
They do.
Okay. Does the members of the county election commission have the same observation powers as the appointed political party observers?
I would say yes.
So, and that would be through what? In other words, through state statute, through something that the Secretary of State has done, or something that Pima County has done? Where does their authority to observe come from?
And I'm gonna object foundation answer if you know.
I think you're going to Title 16, where it talks about even at the level of the ladies and gentlemen who work at polling places must be a mixture of the political parties as well. So political parties are involved in the entire process.
My question, Mr. Nelson, is where does the authority
And
of
Bill, you don't have to get loud. He can hear you.
where did the authority of the members of the Pima County Commission that you say is the same as appointed political party observers, where does that authority come from?
I didn't say they were the same. I said they had the same ability to observe. They have the same ability to observe. I'm not saying that the election commission is the equal entity to a political party.
I want to make sure I understand your testimony. You're saying that the members of the Pima County Election Commission have the same ability to observe as official appointed political party observers during an election.
Yes.
Where does that authority come from?
The authority for the commission or the authority for the political parties?
The authority for the commission members to be equal to the authority of the political party observers. What's the source of that?
And I'm going to object, Bill, because, you know, you're saying ability and then you're saying authority. So which are we talking about, ability or authority? I'm confused. Because those are two different things. So I'm just going to object to form. I'm going to object to form. Answer if you can.
I'm talking about authority. I'm not talking about do their eyeballs work or do they have legs that they can walk with. I'm talking about legal ability in terms of their authority.
And so I'm going to also object foundation. Answer if you can.
The Board of Supervisors is in charge of the conduct of elections by statute, and the Board of Supervisors has appointed and established the Election Integrity Committee. So the Board of Supervisors is the authorization.
Has the Board of Supervisors specifically addressed the observation ability of commission members during elections?
I don't think it's a topic that's been discussed one way or the other.
So can you answer the question then?
Has it been discussed? The answer is no.
So what did you mean then when you said they have the same observation powers as political party observers?
I object to form.
They have a charter, they meaning the commission, that, and by their very name, they are the Election Integrity Committee. They are an oversight in addition to the political parties.
Yeah. So my question is, what did you mean when you said they have the same observation powers as political party observers?
They have the ability to observe in the same fashion that political parties do.
Didn't you just tell me that the Board of Supervisors has not addressed the question of what they can observe or cannot observe?
I'm going to say foundation. Answer if you know.
I would suggest that the Election Integrity Committee, in its charter from the Board of Supervisors, has that authority.
Yeah. We're in the charter.
I don't have the charter in front of me. I have no idea.
What do you mean by charter?
They have a charter,
Yeah.
the Election Integrity Commission.
And you believe that it addresses this issue in that charter?
I believe so.
And so a moment ago when you told me that it was something that the board didn't consider, are you reconsidering your answer?
You asked me whether it was specifically described as observation. I don't believe within the charter there the term observation is used.
Well, look, Brent, here's what I'm really trying to get at with this line is Arizona revised statutes gives political parties certain distinct observation powers, does it not?
It does.
Yeah. And that's something they can point out to you and say ARS 16, whatever it is, says these are the rules. Political party need to have a person that accompanies the ballots, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything like that gives where a member of the commission can say, hey, this rule says I get to be in the room with the computer?
I'm going to object to forming foundation. I don't think he said that anybody gets to be in the room with the computer.
One moment, please. There is not a specific direction about election integrity commission members being in the counting room. Who can be in the counting room is in the elections procedures manual from the Secretary of State's office.
Do they have anything in there about election commission members being in the county?
It does not.
Political party observers can they not?
Among others, yes.
Do the commission members have powers in addition to those of party observers?
I don't believe so.
Are you aware, I think I started asking you about the security problems with the GEM software. So are you aware of security issues concerning the GEM software?
And again, Bill, we're talking about information he's obtained since you discussed this with him last time.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you recall in your prior depositions whether you had any knowledge about security issues concerning the GEM software?
In previous depositions, it was discussed. Yes.
What were the security issues?
And Bill, then you're just asking him to repeat what he said in a prior deposition, which Judge Bryson said we weren't going to do today. You're supposed to talk about new stuff. So if you want to talk about knowledge he's acquired since you discussed this with him last time, have at it. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
But I'm going to instruct him not to repeat answers he gave you in prior depositions, because Judge Bryson said we're not doing that.
What were the security issues that you were aware of in 2006 and 2007?
2006 and 2007?
Yeah.
So you're talking about post February 28th, 2007, since you already talked to him about that then.
I'll say as of
Sure. Brad, have you learned anything about the security issues concerning GEMs since you were last deposed and asked questions about it?
Could you give me a date of that last deposition, please?
Sure. Now, keep in mind that you were deposed on November 2nd, 2007 and February 28th, 2007.
Those are the depositions I'm familiar with, so could you
Yeah.
please restate your question?
And since you're familiar with them, I don't recall, were you asked questions about your security knowledge in November 2nd, 2007?
I'm not sure how one would define my security knowledge. Certainly there's the need for security in all elections.
Well, I'm talking about the GEMS software in these questions. The GEMS software. Security issues with the GEMS software. Do you recall testifying about that on
November 2nd, 2007.
A moment, please. A moment, please. I recall that the topic of security came up, and certainly the topic of gems came up. But that's all I can really recall at this particular point.
You recall testifying about gem security issues on February 28, 2007.
I don't recall that being as much of a topic during that particular deposition, but it might have.
Yeah. Do you recall if you were asked and if you answered about what in, let's say, February 28, 2007, what the security issues were that you knew about concerning the GEMS software?
Now, I'm just going to jump in here, Bill. Can you explain to me how his recollection of his prior deposition is relevant to the subject matter of the counterclaim? And I mean, how that's even a proper topic for discovery, you quizzing him about what he remembers or doesn't remember about his prior deposition? How is that discoverable under Rule 26? I mean, if you can articulate that to me, you can continue quizzing him about his deposition, but I don't think the purpose of a deposition is to quiz somebody about what they remember about their prior deposition. You asked him when we started this deposition what he knows about the security issues with GEMS, and he answered your question as best he could. So why do we need to quiz him about what he recalls telling you before?
Here's the problem, is that you're using the judge saying, you,
Okay.
Rana Fickbaum, you are using the judge's request or order that I not ask the same question.
Correct.
Correct. And you want me to frame a question with Brad Nelson about what he's learned since that deposition.
I just
date.
don't want you to repeat stuff you've already done, Bill, so we can all get in and out of here more efficiently. That's all I care about. But I think quizzing him about what he remembers about his prior depositions, that's not his job. He's here to answer your questions, not educate you about what he said before. What he said before is in the transcripts. There it is.
I understand, but you requested that I ask him about what he's learned since that date.
I know, and you asked him that when we, in the beginning of this deposition, and he answered. So, what else? So, is that the question, you want him to answer it again?
Well, what was his answer?
You got a court reporter right here. Ask her.
I'm trying to get that answer from Mr. Nelson.
I guess he wants you to answer the same question again, but Brad.
No, I'm not asking this. The question I want to know is, what have you learned about the security problems with Jim's software since you were last asked about it, which I suspect was February 28th, 2007.
I wouldn't use the word security problems. I would say security issues that need to be addressed.
Okay. What are these security issues that you have learned since then?
Only that the Secretary of State has asked not only Pima County, but other counties to improve their security around their election management system, whether it's GEMS or some other operating system.
Okay. What are the security issues with the software that you need to be alerted to?
That you use a certified copy, that you hash that copy, as I've already said previously. And that you have limited access to the counting room, limited access to the servers that have the software on it. This is all in the procedures manual. not exclusive to gyms, things of that nature.
And have you, other than reading the security manual, have you studied the problems with GYM's software, security issues with GYM software?
I don't object to form.
We are using the same version of GYMs that we have now for several years, and to my knowledge, there have been no revelations about anything new about that software.
What version are you all
I
using?
think it's 1.18.24. At 1.18.24 to be more specific.
Have you participated in the examination of graphic scanning as a security feature for your election results?
Certainly, I've been a member of the audience when the Election Integrity Commission has had presentations by a vendor who does some of that scanning, as you've referred to.
So, other than being in the audience, have you participated in an examination of the advantages of graphic scanning?
I'm going to object to form.
The only other event that I'm aware of that's related to that is some of the scanning that was done in Humboldt County, California. I'm sorry, I don't remember the year. I want to say 2008, but that may not be correct. To my knowledge, I've read some of the information online about that exercise, but that's all.
Okay. So, you have been in the audience when there was presentation with the commission,
That's correct.
and you've read something about Humboldt County.
Correct.
The commission, in fact, has suggested, did they not, that graphic scanning would be a good thing?
Not just the commission, but the board of supervisors as well.
And did you play any role in the advice to the board of supervisors that caused them to take a position in favor of graphic scanning?
Other than being a member of the election commission's audience, I don't remember. I would not say my input was of any substance one way or the other.
Okay. Other than the legal question that may have been raised by the county attorney's office, would there be any problem for that you could see with the Pima County Board of Supervisors instituting a graphic scanning process to ensure the accuracy of the ballot count?
Well, certainly not just Pima County, but any county within the state of Arizona has to do it under the statutes that allow that to be done. So Pima County by itself, as my reading of the current law, could not do it, exclusively. It would have to be in conjunction with the Secretary of State's office under the current statute.
Okay. So, what my question, I'm trying to exclude that. I understand that, if I understand you correctly, you think there's a legal problem with Pima County instituting a graphic scanning system.
Exclusively by itself, outside of...
Yeah.
You asked me, I think you're asking me separate from the law. Well, I can't do something separate from the law. If I'm understanding your question.
Perhaps you're not, but,
Okay.
but let's see if we can get there, Mr.
Okay.
Nelson. What I want you to do is set aside the legal question. I want to talk about, practicalities. If it was legal, assume it was legal. Is there any problem that you can see with the election division instituting a graphic scanning process?
So, Bill, you're asking him to assume the Secretary of State has approved it and the Department of Justice has okayed it and everybody's got the green light. Practically, would there be any issues? Is that what you're saying, asking him?
I'm asking him to exclude what he believes to be the legal impediments. I want to know in terms of practicality. He's the election director.
In that I've not observed the process being done, have had it described to me and read about it online, I don't think I could really give you a definitive answer. Certainly there's going to be aspects of it with that ignorance about that particular process that I'm not going to be able to appreciate. The manpower involved, the equipment involved, the time involved, if all of this is supposed to be done in this scenario that I believe you may be proposing, if all this is done before the canvass of an election, you asked me to put the legal issues to the side, but in that kind of scenario, I couldn't say whether it's practical or not.
There was a bill in front of the legislature that was passed that created a certain test scheme for graphic scanning, was there not?
Yes, there was.
Did you play any role in following that bill, lobbying that bill, discussing that bill while it was in front of the legislature?
Certainly I followed the bill's progress because from my particular perspective it came from Pima County. So it was of interest to me for that reason. As deliberations and things of that nature may have gone on with the Secretary of State, I don't know about that, and I did not advocate or oppose the law one way or the other. I was just an observer.
Well, you said it came from Pima County. At whose suggestion was that?
The Election Integrity Commission suggested to the Board of Supervisors that this is something that Pima County should look into. Pima County Board of Supervisors has been in favor of it, but understood that there wasn't a law to allow such a thing to go forward. So I believe the Board of Supervisors asked the Secretary of State to include it in a larger omnibus bill, is my understanding.
Okay. And then, do I understand you that during the Commission's examination and during the Board of Supervisors' consideration, no one ever asked you about the practical problems that it might entail with your election division?
I think it was part of the discussion during the Election Integrity Commission meeting, but individual members or the Board of Supervisors as a whole, the answer is no, they didn't ask me any of those questions.
You'd think they would have, right?
And during all that process, you never independently, did you ever ask your staff what the problems might be? Hey, what, if we do this, what are we looking at in terms of manpower, in terms of practical implementation?
I would say we discussed the possibility, as it looked like that the ability to do it was becoming true, meaning a law seemed that it was going to be passed. But I believe what the law says, it talks about a pilot project. There was no description of what a pilot project might be, whether we were scanning in the county room on election day or whether we were scanning at another location, whether county personnel would be involved in that. Certainly my staff and I discussed it to a very limited amount of time to say, if this comes forward, we're going to have to do something. But without any particulars for the statute, we didn't know what something was, so we couldn't really discuss it any further.
And who did you discuss it with your staff?
I would probably say predominantly Mr. Crane, Brian Crane.
And were these at staff meetings where more than Mr. Crane would be present?
I would say, as I would let him know that the legislation was moving forward, I said that this is something that might come about in the future, and it's something that we're going to have to address, but it was just strictly an informal conversation in his office, nothing formal like a group meeting of individuals.
Do you know if Mr. Crane ever gave any input to the election commission about graphic scanning?
He did not.
Do you know if they ever asked him for any?
I doubt it.
You know,
I don't know, but I doubt it.
do you know if he's ever examined the issue?
He may have his own volition gone on and looked at some of the things that happened in, for example, Humboldt County, but I'm not certain whether he has or not.
Do you know whether he has or not?
I do not know.
Okay. So you don't know whether he's examined this issue, and you've never examined the issue of the practical problems, correct?
Because I don't know the parameters set down by statute. Since all it says is a pilot study, I don't know what that means, so I can't begin to guess what the practicalities of actually exercising it would be.
Okay. So the election commission examined the process. You're in the audience. They recommend it. The board of supervisors recommended it. Pima County helped prepare a bill that got through the legislature, but during that entire process you had no input yourself. Is that correct?
I had the ability to provide input, but the proponents within the Election Integrity Commission themselves provided the knowledge that the commission members needed. I was there as a resource for them, but that's all.
Yeah. And you provided no input. Is that correct?
I'll certainly ask questions while the vendor was making presentations and things of that nature, but by and large I would say my contribution to those discussions within the commission was probably small. I am not a commission member. I'm not a voting member.
Do you have an opinion on whether graphic scanning would be a good idea?
I still have that as an open question in my mind.
Yeah. And what are the questions that you think need to be resolved so that you could arrive at a conclusion?
One of the questions that I have pertains to the secrecy of an individual's ballot. I realize that there are statutes that forbid one from showing another one's ballot. In other words, divulging the contents of one's ballots before it goes in the ballot box. I think everybody understands that. I think there's some concern in my mind that after that ballot is dropped in the ballot box and put into a large aggregate of other ballots, that as that ballot perhaps becomes public knowledge, that the secrecy of the ballot may be compromised in this fashion. All of our ballots are identified by a precinct number.
By a what?
A precinct number, an election
Thank you.
precinct number. Some of our precincts have a very, very small number.
Why did you decide that Pima County should buy a crop scanner machine?
And I think you've already gone into this, Bill. Just hold on a second. Hold on.
I'm going to stand for a second just to stretch my legs. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to stand up.
Yeah, sure. Take a break if you want. You need a break? Let's take a, it's 11 o'clock right now.
I could use a break myself.
For election purposes, and there's a separate intergovernmental agreement between the jurisdiction and the recorder for use of the voter registration file and things of that nature. When a jurisdiction needs election services separate from the recorder services, they reimburse the county based on the fee schedule that is ordinance that the Board of Supervisors passed some years ago.
Are you aware that some individuals who work in those elections submit time slips and bill for more hours than they work?
No.
What steps does your division take to make sure that the time slips by the employees are accurate?
To my knowledge, this has not been an issue in the past, but certainly if there's been any inaccurate numbers, usually it is brought to that particular person's attention to say, hey, you know, you didn't work this day and you got it down as a work day, or vice versa. But there's no time clock or anything like that nature, if that's what you're getting to.
Whose task is it within your division to see that the hours are accurately recorded?
Actually, it is the employee's responsibility to record their own hours accurately. And as their individual supervisor signs their pay sheet, there is actually an oath that the employee is signing saying that their hours are accurate. Once that pay sheet is handed into their supervisor reviews it, and eventually that information is put into the county's payroll system.
How many supervisors are we talking about?
Including myself, 3 others.
And who would that be?
It would be Brian Crane, Mary Martinson, Chester Crowley, and myself.
And Chester works in the warehouse?
Correct.
So you, Brian Crane, and Mary Martinson are the non-warehouse supervisors who approve the hours?
For the office person, yes.
Yeah. And there's, and you 3 approve hours based on what the employee submits and says were their hours?
Correct.
And you have no independent system for confirming whether those are accurate or not?
Well, certainly the entire facility is on video, so if we ever needed to check somebody's hours, we could always go back to the archive tapes and see when they were in the building and when they were not.
But beyond that, there's no system for it?
Well, certainly as they enter the building, there's a magnetic card that passes by a lock that logs them in. So they are logged in. And as they pass through various other secure sections of the building, they are logged in again as they progress.
Are you aware that some of the employees submit extra hours?
No, I'm not.
And are you aware of allegations that there's a significant tolerance by yourself for the overbilling and approving hours that weren't worked?
No.
Were you an employee of the election division during any of the prior elections concerning the half-cent sales tax?
What date are we speaking of?
Are you aware that in May 16th, 2006, there was an election concerning a half-cent sales tax for transportation needs?
That was one of the subjects on the ballot. There were others, but yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah. And are you aware that that issue of a half-cent sales tax had been submitted to the voters in Pima County on prior occasions?
Bill, this is a topic you covered in your prior depositions. We're about 3 hours into this.
Yeah, did I ask that question before?
Well, it's your deposition, so I'm sure you know you asked, but you asked him about his familiarity with what led up to that. I think it was in your February 28th election.
Yeah, great. What was his answer?
You took the deposition, not me. And it's not my job to be your clerical aide, but you covered this topic with him before. So ask him something other than what you asked him there.
No, I'm allowed to cover topics. I'm not allowed to ask
Right,
the same questions.
I know, so if you can ask him something beyond what you already asked there, I would appreciate it.
I don't remember what I asked.
Well, it seems like you would want to remember, since Judge Bryson told you you couldn't ask the same thing over again. It's not my job to keep track of that for you. It's your job. I'm not your staff. It's your job, not mine.
What's your understanding of what items go in the official returns envelope?
That has changed through the years as we've changed the various documents that go inside.
Well, okay, let's say in May of 2006.
Just a moment, please. I believe a challenge, if a challenge had been posed at the polls. This is the official envelope or the unofficial? I'm sorry.
The official.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to draw a blank there. I can't recall.
Do poll tapes go into the official returns envelope? The official returns reports?
I believe so.
And you called them something tapes?
P-O-L-L, poll.
And what happens with the official returns report when it's received by your office?
Object form. What time are we talking about?
May of 2006. Well, until I mention a different time, let's stick right here with May of 2006.
Thank you.
What was the procedure when the official returns envelope comes to your office?
Again, I'm having a little difficulty recalling what the contents of the official envelope was. Because I often get it mixed up with the unofficial envelope. But one of the things that we need to secure thereafter the election is the ballot report and the poll tape that comes from that particular precinct.
Well, what goes in? There's a copy of the poll tape that goes into the unofficial returns envelope. Would that be correct?
There's a copy of the poll tape that goes with the ballots that's secured in a separate bag, and then another tape is returned along with the ballot report, and I cannot recall which particular envelope it comes with.
Okay. But there's a...
But there is a second tape and a second report.
Okay. So the official, one copy of the official returns report, known as the poll tape, goes into the official returns envelope. You agree?
It comes back in one of the envelopes. I can't recall which one it's in.
Would you agree that the official returns envelope is sealed and is not opened by your division employees?
No, I would not necessarily agree with that.
No?
No.
Under what circumstances can your employees open the official returns envelope?
I believe the procedures manual allows us to get in if there's a report that's needed to conduct the audit.
Yeah. And does do you then need to notify political parties if you're opening the official returns sealed envelope?
There's no requirement to do so. Certainly, it's an appropriate thing to do.
And would you agree that the official returns report are supposed to be signed by individuals at the voting locations, the precincts or other voting locations?
Yes.
And you do agree that there's an official and an unofficial envelope?
Yes.
And as for the official envelope, you don't know what goes in.
I can't recall. Certainly there are documents, but I can't recall at this point in time.
And the unofficial envelope, can you recall what goes in it?
No, I cannot. Not at this time.
since you have been the election director, have you made changes as to whether or not the official returns report should be and must be in the official returns envelope?
I believe you're talking about the ballot report.
No, I'm talking about the poll tape. Isn't it called
Okay.
an official returns report? What's the poll tape called?
I would just go ahead and call that as an unofficial results or a poll tape. It's kind of the terminology I understand, but certainly yes, that needs to be returned in one of the envelopes.
Well, does the poll tape have a specific name printed on it?
Certainly at the beginning of the day, it's going to say zero tape, and I think at the end of election night, it may say election results.
I mean, doesn't it say something like official returns report?
I don't believe it does. It may, but I don't think it does.
Okay, so you think it says what on it?
I think it says election results.
Election results, okay. So that is the tape that the appropriate persons need to sign,
Correct.
and there's 2 of those. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And would you, and you don't know whether they put one of them in the unofficial envelope?
They return one with the ballot bag, and the other comes back in either the official or unofficial envelope.
Okay. And on what circumstances would the official returns envelope need to be opened?
If the poll workers put inappropriate material inside of the official envelope, ballots that haven't been counted yet, early ballots that have been dropped off at the polls, those are not the appropriate bags for those items to go in, and those ballots need to be taken out in order to be administered correctly.
The official returns envelope, is that a plastic see-through envelope, do you know?
It is.
Okay. So you're saying that if someone in the official returns envelope at the polls that you've trained, you train these people, don't you?
Not anymore, but the department trains the individuals, yes.
Okay. So if they put ballots in, you can look and see, and you would need to open it.
Correct.
Since you've been the election director, have you made changes as to what should be put in the official returns envelope?
Again, I can't remember what the contents of the official returns envelopes are, so I couldn't give you an answer at this particular point in time.
And for the RTA ballots, do you know what individuals at your office packed those ballots in the boxes?
This is for storage at Iron Mountain.
Yeah.
I believe it would have been a group comprised of probably 4 to 5 office staff members. I could make a guess to some of their names.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say it's probably going to be Mary Martinson, Romy Romero. I believe Paula Corbett was still employed with us at that particular time. Perhaps Evelyn Bustamante. Those are some of the names that come off to the top of my head.
Okay. And do the official returns envelope go into those same boxes?
No,
Where do they
not
go?
with the ballots, no.
Where do they go?
Trying to recall, again, I can't remember the contents of the official returns envelope, but all of the materials that were consumed, meaning ballots with votes on them, forms that were filled out, things of that nature, eventually go to Iron Mountain.
Yeah. The ballots are preserved because of a requirement of state law and federal law, are they not?
Correct.
Are you uncertain whether or not the official returns envelope with its contents are also preserved in the same manner as ballots?
have to go back and look at the statute, but I believe certainly ballots need to be maintained. I'm not certain whether it mentions official returns or not, but they are stored nonetheless.
Are they stored in the same manner with the ballots?
I believe so.
Do you have any other place you store stuff like that?
Well, certainly for a certain period of time after the election is over with, meaning after it's canvassed, we have those poll tapes and ballot reports available for the public to come and look at for a 6 months period of time.
Yeah. But that's not, you don't open up the official returns envelope for the public to look at, isn't that correct?
Again, I can't remember what the contents are, but we make available to the public what we are to make available to the public.
Yeah. So what then is your office procedure for what happens to the official returns envelopes when when the canvass has been approved by the Board of Supervisors?
Again, I can't remember what the contents of the official envelope are, but if they are to be stored, they are boxed up and shipped off to the treasurer to store in, right now, Iron Mountain.
But you don't know whether they're stored or not?
Not right offhand. They could be.
We're still talking about May 2006, right? We're still talking about May 2006, right?
Well, we were, yeah.
Okay.
But have you made any procedure changes concerning the contents of the official returns envelope since you've been election director?
I don't believe so.
Have you made any procedural changes about whether the official returns reports are to be in the official returns envelope?
Again, I don't recall what the exact contents of the official return envelope are, but I can't recall. So the ballot reports and the poll tapes do come back in the appropriate envelope. I just can't remember which one it is.
Have you ever worked with James Berry while he was an assistant in the county administrator's office?
He was a fellow employee, but we never worked on any projects or anything like that together.
Are you aware that that Mr. Berry worked with Brian Crane in accumulating information about data from bond elections prior to the RTA?
I'm not aware of it.
Would it have been necessary for Mr. Berry to talk to you to get your approval to work with Brian Crane and accumulate bond election data?
Like I say, my conversations with Mr. Berry were more or less, passing in the hallway or riding in the elevator together, so there was never an exchange of information on particular projects one way or the other. So, but my gut feeling is, from those informal conversations, that Jim would have approached me to say, hey Brad, I'm going to talk to Brian about X, and that did not occur.
Are you aware that he did work with Brian prior to the RTA?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that in addition to his county employment, Jim Berry was employed by a independent group supporting the RTA election?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that he has worked with other independent groups supporting county bond elections?
No.
When the you had talked before about the audit batches that became state law in the fall election of 2006. Do you recall those changes in state law?
Yes.
During the legislature's consideration of the statute requiring hand audits, did you have input into the legislature as to what the contents of that bill should be?
Only indirectly. Certainly I, and from the Pima County area, then Representative Ted Downing, Tom Ryan, met with some of the sponsors of the bill, who was Mr. Downing, I believe, and Senator Karen Johnson. But those were the legislatures, members of the legislature that I spoke with the most, but not as individuals, in kind of a group effort.
Yeah. And did you lobby and argue that county races should not be included in the hand count?
No.
Do you know how it was that county races were excluded from the hand count?
No.
But it was not an issue that you addressed?
I don't think it was an issue that was addressed by that group at all. I'm thinking that they were more interested in state level offices, however those might be defined.
Did you communicate with Karen Osborne about whether or not the hand count audits should include county races?
I don't think I did.
Prior to the passage of that law, during your tenure as county election division head, had there been hand count audits of any type to confirm the machine counts?
With speaking with some individuals before I started here with Pima County, the answer is yes.
And explain further, sir.
There were representatives from the political parties, predominantly the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party, that did a random count of a precinct and of a particular office to find out that the hand count of the ballots matched the machine count of the ballots for that randomly selected precinct.
But that all occurred before you became election director?
Correct.
Who was the election director?
Immediately before me, I believe Martha Durkin was acting elections director. Previous to that, I believe Mitch Etter was the elections director.
Who was it?
Mitch Etter, E-T-T-E-R.
And do you know if there had been confirming hand counts when Martha Durkin was in charge?
I don't know for certain.
Do you know if there had been when Mitch Etter was in charge?
Not firsthand, but I was told by individuals. The answer was that yes.
Did you change that procedure when you became election director?
I questioned the procedure when I came here because it was so foreign to me, but upon consideration I continued to use it.
And you continued to do that until when?
Well, until the state statute allowed us to expand the hand count even more than we had been doing.
And the prior hand count audits included audits of county races, did it not?
I don't know. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party representative usually picked a random race, whether it was a county office or not. I don't know. Don't recall.
Okay. So the political parties, by procedure, picked a race to audit in a precinct that they would select.
Correct.
And all the votes for that, all the ballots in that precinct would be hand counted for that race, correct? And and this was an auditing practice to confirm the accuracy of the machine.
I assume so, yes.
And you permitted that practice to continue until the fall of 2006, would that be correct?
Well, yes, but at that point in time, the new law came into effect that we did an even broader hand count than that was previously done.
Except that the new law doesn't require hand counts for county races.
That is true.
Has anyone ever told you that you were limited to only the races that were required to be hand counted?
I believe informally the county attorney's office has informed me of that.
And who in the county attorney's office?
I believe the lead election attorney at that time was probably Karen Fryer.
And this was an oral statement she made to you?
I believe so.
Do you know if there's anything in writing that's ever been presented to you on that question?
I think perhaps a communication between Chris Straub of the county attorney's office and Mr. Huckleberry and the board might exist, but I'm uncertain.
Do you know an Ann Lilly?
I do.
Yeah. And had she worked as an assistant for Brian Crane?
Yes.
Do you know why she was moved out of acting as his assistant?
Her services were needed elsewhere once Romy Romero left my office. Ann is now serving as the campaign filing officer for my office.
And what was the last name?
Romero,
No, Ann.
Lilly, Lillie.
How, I may have asked you this, but I don't think so. How long was Tiffany Richardson with your office as a permanent employee?
Less than a year.
The Attorney General's office picked up from Iron Mountain the ballots from the RTA election, took them to Phoenix and performed a hand count.
you're familiar with them having done that?
Yes, I am.
Did you ever see the actual numbers of the results of what they counted?
No.
Are you aware that their count didn't have certain precincts in it?
I do not know that.
Does Runback still print the ballots for Pima County?
It does.
Do you know when Pima County started experimenting with the ballot on demand system?
This was before my arrival here in Pima County, so I want to say late 90s.
Were any ballots for the RTA printed on the ballot for demand system?
We did not have ballot on demand here in Pima County during that election. So the answer is, if you're saying there was a ballot on demand machine here in Pima County and the RTA ballots have been printed there, no.
Okay. So all the RTA ballots were pursuant to the Pima County's contract with Rumbeck?
Yes.
There's a document entitled Pima County Division of Elections Security Plan in September 2007. Is this the plan that was also known as the Huckleberry Plan, you know?
I don't know what it might have been called.
Okay. It talks about there's a two-person rule. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. I have the report in front of me. Do you have a page to refer to?
Yeah. Boy, I tell you, my printer.
You need a new printer?
No, I need to find out why it's.
Well, I
Yesterday
just found out-
decided
I'm
to-
his IT.
Hey,
Off
wait a
the
minute, wait.
record.
Sorry.
That's-
My apologies.
If you guys want to moan and groan about your printer, let's just go off the record so nobody has to pay for that.
Well, as long as we're on video, we're on record.
Okay.
So you need to know what page before you can
Well,
talk
no,
about
no,
the
no.
two-person
I was just,
rule.
I was just figuring that you might have had it at your fingertips.
Yeah,
There, so.
well, I do now.
Okay.
It's on page 9. If you need to refresh your recollection.
Thank you.
And do I understand that this two-person rule? What's the point of this two-person rule?
Basically, so that there's not just one person in the room while GEMS is open and operating. There always has to be two.
And you're the guy that selects the two. Is that correct?
they have to be trained on the necessary information on GEMS. So we're talking about Mr. Crane, Vanessa, and Tom, as I mentioned earlier, are the individuals who know how to operate GEMS. So once GEMS is open, at least 2 of those individuals have to be in the room while GEMS is open.
Okay. It's the rule that when GEMS is open, 2 of them need to be there to open it. Right?
And once open, remain there until it's closed.
Remain in the room.
Right.
And this would be throughout the process of the ballot definition process.
Yes.
And that takes for, like a general election, how many weeks a month?
Again, Mr. Crane would be better to answer this question than I, but it is a considerable length of time. They start in July, and the ballot is not known until, of course, the primary election is over with and canvassed, and that's not until early September. So it is a long process.
Yeah. And do you have a system for determining that they remain in the room?
That is this law right here. I should say this procedure.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a camera? I mean, how
Oh, yes, absolutely. Plus the mag cards that read people in and out of the room.
Okay. And then when they need to go to the toilet,
They've got a mag card out.
Okay. And then they have to sign out on GEMS? Would that be the...
There has to be 2 people in the room.
Yeah.
So if one of them has to leave the room for whatever reason, they don't until there's a second person in the room.
Since we've last spoken in 2007, has there been changes with your reporting with Chuck Huckleberry?
I believe in 2007 I was not on a reporting schedule with Mr. Huckleberry, whereas for many years now, perhaps since 2007, I meet with him weekly.
And describe how that comes about and what this weekly process is.
Basically, and this is not just with myself, but I believe Wednesdays are his meetings with all of his department directors, where his department directors come to him, presumably the same way that I do, with issues that are before our particular department that we need to keep him informed of, or perhaps ask his assistance of from other departments.
Okay. So this is in his office?
Yes, it is.
All the department directors?
No, we're there one at a time. So I would be there, and with Dr. Moffat being a member of the Election Integrity Commission, he's in the meeting as well.
And you said Moffat is there as
He is,
a staff person for the, what precisely is his role?
you would have to ask Mr. Huckleberry or Dr. Moffat on what his specific requirements are, but I would say that as a member of the Election Integrity Commission, Mr. Huckleberry wants him to be informed about what's going on in the Elections Department as well. So rather than me telling Moffat on one occasion, Huckleberry on another, just bring us all in the same room and get it done all at once.
Okay, so you and John show up on Wednesdays.
Correct.
you,
I have an agenda.
yeah, how does that work?
I show up with my agenda. Here's the items that I want to talk about. Let him know what's going on, things of that nature.
So there are some weeks you don't have anything to talk about?
Actually, with not for a long time, with redistricting and everything else going on, there's always something going on.
And then do you have a little written sheet that you show up with?
Yes, my agenda that I hand to both Dr. Moffat and Mr. Huckleberry.
In the this written agenda started when?
Probably 2 to 3 years ago.
I want to take a break and see.
Registered voters inside of that particular precinct. So small, in fact, that it would not be uncommon, particularly in a primary election, for only, let us say, one Green Party person to come and vote a ballot, or one Libertarian Party person come to vote a ballot. If we were to put that scan for the public, the secrecy of their ballot would be compromised. Those are some of the things that go through my mind.
It's not uncommon for a precinct to have one voter.
For a particular style of ballot, yes.
Yeah. And what do you mean by style of ballot?
Well, during a primary election, if I'm a registered member of the Green Party or a Libertarian Party or any of the major political parties, I am required to vote only my particular party ballot. Also, if I'm an individual who has no party affiliation, I am able to come in on primary election day and tell the poll worker I would like to vote, for example, a Green Party ballot. Those ballots are not chosen very often, and there's the potential that one ballot for the Green Party could be cast. You would know who that individual was because beside their name in the poll book is the party ballot that they've received. So that's some of the things I'm concerned with.
Okay. So your concern is that there might be a precinct where one person votes in a Green Party primary, right?
Well, I'm using that as an example. I mean, we have ballot variations even in general elections where only a certain part of the precinct is within a fire district or a school district or a municipality. So there's the possibility that the vote could be compromised in that the secrecy of the vote could be compromised there as well. I'll admit it is a small probability that will happen, but it could.
Okay. Well, let's get back to this. Let's say we have a voting precinct, and it's a political party primary, and there's one Green Party voter. Can we agree on those facts?
Sure.
And you're concerned that if all the ballots from that precinct are graphically scanned, that we would be able to see a picture of the ballot of this one voter.
That's correct.
Correct? And once we see the picture, we can see that Green Party person voted for this Green Party candidate.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in that precinct, is there not a statement of votes cast that would say there was one Green Party voter and here's who he voted for?
I see where you're going, and you're exactly right. Even with the statement of votes cast without graphical imaging, his vote would be potentially compromised.
Yeah. So what does the graphic scanning add to the secrecy problem?
I'm just using that as an example. So it's an extreme one, but it is still an example. For example, if there were a small number of ballots in another ballot variation, you would be able to tell that individual's vote too. So.
Yeah, but what would the scanning of the ballots add as information that wouldn't be there with the statement of votes cast?
As far as secrecy is concerned, Only because the Constitution, I believe it's the state Constitution, provides for the secrecy of a person's ballot. That would be a concern of mine as to how we would juggle with that. Understanding your previous statement that it's already compromised by the statement of votes cast, I'm not certain how to handle that dilemma.
Well, I'm not asking you how to handle it. What I want to know is, you have identified secrecy as a concern.
As one concern.
So what information would there be that wouldn't be on the statement of votes cast?
None that I'm aware of.
Are there other, what other concerns do you have then about?
I think it is somewhat unlikely, but I think there is such a way that, let us say, an employer or perhaps a representative of a union wants their employees to vote a particular way on a ballot question or for a candidate, and they ask for them to mark their ballot in such a way that it can be seen on an image, and that compromises their ballot as well.
I don't understand that. Explain that to me. What are you saying?
Well, if an individual marks their ballot in a certain way, puts a little happy face or a star or something like that down in the corner, their ballot could be compromised as well on an image scan too.
Okay. So let's say that now a little happy face, let's say, is put on it. Now, are you saying that that a boss or a labor union instructs their people to put happy faces on the...
I'm saying that could potentially identify the ballot back to the person, even in a larger aggregate of ballots, to an individual.
How does that work? I don't understand it.
An individual could mark their ballot in such a fashion, they could even sign their name to the particular ballot as well, and put it in the ballot box as well, and that compromises that ballot.
Okay. So Mrs. Jones could write on Janet Jones, and then that would compromise the secrecy of Janet Jones's ballot because she wrote her name on it. Is that?
It would identify that ballot as Janet Jones, as I would suggest.
Okay. How often do you see names written on ballots?
Often.
Yeah. And so do you then have, is that one of your concerns, that voters who write their own name on the ballot, if a graphic scan is made of that ballot, the secrecy of this voter who chose to write their own name on it would be compromised?
Yes.
But you all already know, right, who this person is who wrote the name on it?
The majority of ballots that come in with a person's name on it are coming through the early ballot process. Certainly there is a necessity to sign the affidavit that's associated with the ballot, and some voters make the mistake of signing the actual ballot themselves. That's caught during duplication the majority of the times, but at the polling places it may not necessarily be caught.
And when you say it's caught during duplication, I'm not following you.
As the ballots are prepared for count, by the ballots, I'm talking about the ballots that come in through the mail, they are prepared for count. And if the board who is getting those ballots ready for count notice that an individual has signed their ballot, that ballot is sent for duplication so that the name is no longer part of the ballot.
Part of the what?
Part of the ballot.
Okay. So a separate ballot is then prepared.
Correct.
And the original ballot is put somewhere else.
Yes.
And then you keep track. Here are all these people that sign their name to the ballot.
Among other duplication processes, yes.
Yeah. And so then if you had a graphic scanning process, you would be scanning, I take it, the duplicate ballot that had been prepared.
Yes.
But you're concerned then that, so our concern, or yours at that, on this issue, would be that somebody went to the precinct and then there wrote their name on the ballot.
It's a potential. It doesn't happen often, but it's a potential.
Okay. Can you see any other problems other than happy faces and names?
No, sir.
And then, are you aware of what the advantages are of graphic scanning?
I think that the proponents of graphic scanning would probably say it's an additional auditing tool. I think that's an objective way to put it. I would say the proponents would say that it's a tool to use to audit an election. So that's an advantage.
Yeah, it would dramatically increase the difficulty of someone providing false election results, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah. Are you aware that that there might be software glitches, let's say, in the GEM software that could result in results that weren't accurate?
Just a moment, please. I would suggest that an additional audit, whether it's being a hand count audit or a graphic audit, gives support to what a machine count might be. So it's not always software. It can be a hardware problem as well. So I think you asked me whether it would highlight a software problem. It could potentially, but not just a software problem.
Yeah. And you are aware of what happened in Humboldt County when they used a graphic scanning system for one election?
I'm aware they were using an out-of-date version of software that they discovered that they should have been using through the use of that graphic scan.
Okay. So, in Humboldt County, I believe you testified earlier that you've read about the graphic scanning, I could say, experiment that they did on an election there with the cooperation of the election division in Humboldt County.
I've read about it, yes.
Yeah. And that one of the things they discovered was that, wasn't it like 194 votes weren't counted?
Because they were using the wrong version of software, yes.
Okay, that was the because.
Yeah.
But what they did discover was that there was, that the official count had missed a block of votes.
Yes.
Yeah. And actually, as a result of that, wasn't there then a note sent nationwide to every election jurisdiction that was using that type of software, that here's a problem and here's the correction for it?
Foundation. Answer if you can, if you know.
If an alert was sent, I'm not certain who it might have come from, and it certainly didn't pertain to us because we had our version up to date.
Yeah. Okay. So you're just you know that they discovered a problem there that related to that software, and it was what you'd call a glitch, or it was an error in the software.
There was a bug in the software. A newer version had been designed and certified. However, Humboldt County did not use it.
Okay, but you don't know whether any alert went out to any other jurisdiction that used the same software that would have had the same bug in it.
I'm unaware of it.
Other than the two problems that you talked about with the graphic scanning, can you think of any other problems?
Since I've never experienced graphical scanning, I just can't answer one way or the other there.
There was are you aware that the election computer that Pima County uses has a CD burner on it?
We're talking about the GEM server here?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yes, I'm aware.
And then if data copies are made on that computer, would those data copies be on CDs?
I'm not certain whether it's a CD or a DVD, and when you say data, I'm not exactly sure what you're defining there either. Certainly, as we update election night results on the website, and also transmit that information to the Secretary of State, a CD or DVD media is used to send unofficial results. So my answer is, depending on what kind of data you're talking about, I'm not certain how much data can fit on one of those devices.
Yeah. Does your election department do a backup of election data when you're counting early ballots prior to election day?
Yes.
And how is that backup of the data accomplished?
You'd have to ask Mr. Crane or others.
You don't know?
No.
Okay. Do you know if the, I just had, we were just talking about before, the CD burner, do you know if it utilizes that facility to do the backup?
I do not know.
And do you know if that computer has the ability to back up data on tape?
Again, we're talking about the GEM server. I don't believe there's a tape device there at all.
Is that the computers in your election division that are utilized for office functions, are they part of a network?
They are.
And how is the data backed up in that network?
You're getting a little bit, not quite a bit out of my field of expertise, but my understanding is that we're on a central domain with the county's ID department, and it's backed up there.
Do you know in 2006 how that data was backed up?
Which data are we speaking of, please?
On your office computer network.
We were not on a central network at that particular point in time, so it was backed up within the elections department.
How many computers do you guys have in your election department?
Today?
Let's say in 2006, 2007.
Which one, 2006?
Go with 2006.
excluding what was used for tabulation purposes, I would probably say 8 to 10.
And your election computer is not part of a network, correct?
It was on its own network. It's its own domain within the elections department for office documents and things of that nature. The GEM servers now and then were standalone. They were not connected to anything.
Right.
So you had 8 to 10 in 2006 computers that were connected within your office, were they not? Or were they not connected?
They were certainly on the same, I believe the terminology is on the same domain.
Well, there's, isn't there something called a local area network? Like, did your office have a local area network?
To my knowledge, yes, but you're getting out of my area of expertise.
Do you know how that information was backed up at that time?
You'd have to ask Mr. Crane.
Okay. So was Mr. Crane the person who backed up that information?
Yes.
When you recall Isabel Arisa talking to you about her concern that Brian Crane was taking CD copies of the election data home with him.
And Brad, you don't have to answer that. Bill, that was the first thing you started with on November 2nd, 2007, in your prior deposition. So you don't have to answer that.
Okay. Masons.
I mean, if you want to talk to him about things he's learned since you talked to him on November 2nd, 2007, Bill, I don't have a problem, but you already talked to him about that.
Did you know in 2007 that the GEM's computer did not have a tape device?
It's been a long time. And I can't recall for certain, but I don't believe it had a tape device.
Did you know in 2007 that there was a fireproof safe next to the election computer? In the computer.
The fireproof safe that I'm aware of and where we were located in 2007, I don't believe was next to the computer.
Is in the same room, wasn't it?
There was some fireproof filing cabinets in that room, but I'm not certain whether I would consider it to be a safe.
Okay.
And what was the purpose of the fireproof filing cabinet in the computer room?
It was there when I arrived on the scene as an employee with Pima County, so I don't know the motivation for acquiring the safe.
Regardless of motivation, what was it used for?
I never used it personally, so I believe petty cash was locked up inside.
Okay. Do you know if it had any other function other than petty cash?
I do not know.
Do you know where backup data for the election data was kept in 2006?
No, I do not.
Do you know the difference between tapes and CDs?
I do.
are you aware that several employees at the database trial testified that Brian Crane took home CDs during the election that contained election data?
I'm going to just object form and foundation. Answer if you can.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, you are asking me if I'm familiar with testimony given in previous cases where previous elections department employees said that Brian Crane was taking home election data while an election was active?
Yes.
Thank you. I am not certain of the time frames of the testimony that I'm aware of from those previous cases as to whether it was during an active election, but there was testimony to the effect that from those individuals, that Brian Crane was taking information home. But I can't say for certain whether it was, to my recall, whether it was during an active election or not.
And can you recall that information was the same? Well, are you aware that that testimony came from, for instance, Robbie Evans Jr.?
I'm familiar with I did not review Mr. Evans' testimony prior to coming here today, just my own, but it's my understanding that those were his words.
Yeah. And Robbie Evans Jr., for something like a 4-year period, was an assistant to Brian Crane, was he not?
He was.
And he would have been in a position to know what a CD was and know what the contents of that CD was, would he not?
I do not know how he would know what the contents of the CD was.
Okay.
Certainly he would know what a CD was.
Yeah.
The contents I don't know.
And was his testimony the same as what Isabella Risa had talked to you about?
Foundation. Answer if you can.
Again, I did not review their testimony, but I believe that they both made a statement suggesting that Brian Crane was taking data home, but they did not describe what that data was.
Are you saying that they didn't tell you that it was on CDs?
No, I'm telling you that they didn't tell me that they knew what the content of the media was.
Okay. So they told you that during the election.
No, not during the election. I beg your pardon. I didn't mean to interrupt. I beg your pardon.
Well, it had been reported, you had it not, that Brian Crane was taking CDs home with election data during an election.
Office data.
Who told you it was office data?
Brian Crane.
But my question is, you were told by employees within the department that he was taking election data home, were you not?
Again, to differentiate, when you say elections data, I'm not talking about tabulation. I'm not talking about anything about GEM software. I'm talking about office documents, word processing documents, Excel spreadsheets, things of that nature.
No, I'm talking about election tabulation data that was on the election computer.
They never said that to me.
Were you aware that there was trial testimony from Robbie Evans Jr. and Isabel, and I think Chester Crowley, that he was taking home CDs during an election of election data?
Again, I didn't review those individuals' testimonies or depositions, so I cannot recall exactly what they said in depositions, but in conversations they had with me, they never said it was tabulation data.
Are you aware that in a public trial, those individuals testified that Brian Crane took home during an election data on CDs?
Again, the way I would define elections data, the answer is no, I don't think they said that.
How would you define election data?
To me, an election is tabulation. Office, now if you want to say, was he taking office documentation home? Meaning we're processing documents, spreadsheets, payrolls, things of that nature. I was aware of that. And so if they've testified that he was taking election data, if they mean that, then I would agree. But if they're saying, using the term elections data, tabulation software, vote counts, things of that nature, that was never brought forward to me.
Okay. By brought forward to you, what do you mean by that?
In other words, you mentioned Ms. Ariza. She came to me and said Brian was taking home data. I went to Brian Crane and asked him what he was taking home. He said office documentation. And he said the reason is because of security issues.
My question to you right now, what I've been asking about, was are you aware that at trial, in the database lawsuit, do you know what lawsuit that is?
I believe so.
Yeah. That I believe at least 3 of your employees, the election division, testified that Brian Crane was taking home with him during the election backup data from your Jim's election computer, tabulation data on CDs. Are you aware that there was such testimony?
No. I don't recall that.
Yeah. Did you ever learn after the trial that there had been such testimony?
Not to my recall.
Okay. So is it your sworn testimony that as of today you're not aware that several of your employees testified under oath that Brian Crane had taken home during elections election data on CDs?
Again, if you mean elections data meaning gems,
Yeah, Brad, tabulation data from your election computer, not.
Bill, there's no need to get loud. He's defined for you that he obviously understands elections data to be something different than what you understand it to be. So he's trying to be precise. Just, there's no reason to get agitated. Answer as best you can, Brad.
I believe your question was, subsequent to the trial, did I become aware of testimony from individuals saying that election data was being taken home? And I would say no if we're talking about gems.
And when you use the word gems, I'm talking about tabulation data. Not necessarily gem software, but
A live election, the
the
parameters
data
of the
file.
live election.
Yeah.
I understand. And yeah, nothing of that kind either was taken home to my knowledge.
Okay. So is today the first time that you've known about this?
I'm going to object to Four-Man Foundation.
My understanding is as they gave testimony that data was being taken home, how they defined that data and what perhaps discussions were going on in court, I'm not certain.
Yeah.
So did they testify that the data was taken home? Yes. Did they testify whether it was vote totals? I don't know whether that's, to this date, I still don't know whether that's what they testified.
There was testimony from Robbie Evans Jr. that election department had purchased a rubber stamp with to be used in the tabulation room to stamp summary reports that were printed prior to the polls closing. Are you aware of that?
Is he aware of the testimony?
Yeah.
I believe I am aware of that testimony. I know the rubber stamp came up in testimony.
And how would it have worked in your office to purchase that rubber stamp? Who would have bought that?
That was already in our supplies prior to my arrival, so I think in the mid-90s that stamp was purchased.
Yeah. And do you know what the stamp said?
I think it said unofficial and unaudited.
Yeah. And do you know what that stamp had been used for, or was used for during your tenure?
Sure. Because prior to the canvass by the Board of Supervisors, that particular election is unofficial.
Yeah.
So we didn't want that copy going out and people thinking these are the final results, because it was not.
And there was testimony about a table in the computer room where summary reports would be on the table prior to the close of polls. Are you aware of such a table?
When are we speaking of, and where are we speaking of? We talking about we talking about today, the election environment at my office today, or?
No, let's talk about it in 2006.
Okay. So you're asking me whether there were summary reports?
Yeah, do you ever see summary reports in the computer room on a table that had been stamped unofficial prior to the polls closing?
I don't believe so.
Yeah. Are you aware that several employees testified that they had seen you come into the computer room and pick up summary reports and look at them and take them out of the room during an election, but prior to the polls closing?
I am familiar with that testimony, yes.
Yeah. And do you disagree with the testimony?
I think we need to define what kind of summary report we're talking about. Certainly there's summary reports that need to be printed in conjunction with an election.
Yeah.
So one summary report is not the same as the other, though they are titled the same.
Well, tell me the difference.
Well, certainly summary reports are produced as required by statute in advance of the logic and accuracy test. Summary reports are also produced, again, by statute when we're preparing batches of ballots for hand count audits. There's a variety of reasons why summary reports are produced statutorily in advance of an election day.
When was the first time that you utilized summary reports as part of audit batches?
Part of what?
Audit batches?
Thank you.
I would, if you say me personally or Pima County, I may come up with two different answers here. But I know that reports for auditing off of the GEM software were produced probably since GEMS was purchased by Pima County in 1998 for the purposes of auditing.
Describe that fully. I'm not sure I'm following you.
Well, one of the things that Pima County had done, this was even back in the punch card days, was to...
Let's talk about GEMS.
Okay, well, where I'm going to is
Okay.
auditing and the producing of reports that help you with that audit. So during GEMS,
And Brad, just hold on. Yeah.
Sure.
This is a topic that you discussed on February 28th, 2007. And if you look at pages 17 and 18, you're asking him about the GEMS audit reports, whether you call them summary reports, or whether they're audits. I mean, you had this conversation before, Bill. So I think that you already talked to him about what was going on in 2006. If you want to talk to him about what's occurred since then, I don't have a problem with it, but this is something you already probed.
I'm asking different questions.
Well, I'm looking at the questions you asked then, and you're asking him about, you know, this terminology, the difference between audit report, summary report, why you use them in connection with GEMS. It's right here. Whether he was given a copy of the reports before the election, before the RTA May 2006 election, that's at page 19. Can we just ask something different?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you need to pose your question again.
Yeah. I believe you were explaining with summary reports the occasions that they would have been printed and looking at the 2006 or prior to 2006 time frame. And if I followed you, there are, well, go ahead.
Okay, but go ahead. That's not a question. What's the question you want him to answer?
Yeah, the occasions when summary reports would be printed.
As I'm going to do some repetition here, certainly during the logic and accuracy testing that were necessary.
I'm want to, if you could limit this to once ballots have been counted, starting counting. Mr. Nelson, before any ballot is counted, a summary report is printed called a zero report. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. And the zero report has all zeros on it,
Correct.
right? Okay. From that date, is there any reason to print a summary report prior to the close of elections?
Yes.
Okay. Describe.
For the necessity of audit batches.
Okay. But that audit batches was a law that went into effect for the fall of 2006.
That sounds correct.
Okay. Let's talk about from the time of the RTA election and exclude the new law that went into effect.
Okay.
We've got zero reports. Was there any other occasion that would require a summary report?
Prior to the closing of the polls?
Yes.
No.
Are you aware that there was testimony from various employees that it was a regular practice to print summary reports?
Time frame, please.
Yes. From, let's see, 2004 up until the summer of, up until the RTA and including the RTA.
I am familiar with testimony that people said summary reports were generated. Yes.
And are you familiar with whether those individuals, like Robbie Evans Jr. was one of them?
He was one of them, yes.
Yeah. And he was an assistant for Brian Crane.
Yes.
So he would know what a summary report was.
I would presume so.
Yeah. And he testified that you would come in and pick up a copy and leave with it. Are you aware of that?
I believe that was his testimony.
Yeah. Do you agree with that testimony?
No, I do not. And we're speaking before the closing of the polls?
Sure.
That seems okay. No, I do not.
Yeah. I think Isabella Rice also testified to that. Do you agree with her testimony?
I don't recall her testimony on that subject. I certainly recall Mr. Evans.
Do you know Tiffany Richardson?
I do.
Yeah, and what was her job with your
I believe her
election?
job title was, I believe it was computer land specialist. I believe she's no longer with the department.
Computer what specialist?
Computer land LAM specialist.
What does that mean?
That was her job title within the scheme of job titles for Pima County.
So is that the same job title that Brian Crane had?
I believe it was.
Yeah. Does anyone else within your election division have that same job title?
No, and Mr. Crane no longer has that title either.
What's his title?
He is election unit supervisor.
And what was her job when she worked in your division as computer land specialist?
She worked under Mr. Crane, so he would be the individual to discuss that with.
And what's your understanding of what she did?
What he, as his supervisor, directed her to do.
Okay. And when did her employment end?
She did not successfully complete probation approximately 2 years ago. I could be wrong on that, but it has been some time.
And who made a determination that she did not successfully complete probation?
I was the one who informed her that she did not complete probation.
And do you know what the issue was that caused her not to be able to complete?
And here, you know, Bill, I don't know if we can get into employee discipline as confidential. I mean, if you get her permission for him to talk about it, great. But I think unless she agrees, there's employee confidentiality concerns with him talking about the reason for someone's discipline.
Well, I think you can answer. So I'm asking.
Well,
you to answer.
I don't think he can. I'm not going to tell him he can do something that'll put him on the receiving end of a lawsuit from her for sharing confidential information. You know, you make all this stuff a public record. She's out looking for another job. Bill, I think that, get her permission, and
I think it's an appropriate question. You can direct him not to answer.
don't answer that. I think that it's an invitation to a lawsuit from Tiffany Richardson. Get her permission, and we'll give you a written response that he'll sign off under oath, Bill.
Are you aware that Tiffany refused at one time to sign in with Brian Crane?
I'm not certain what you're referring to when you say sign in.
Do you have a system where two persons need to enter a code to be able to operate the election computer?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Yeah. And when that code is entered, did you ever use the term sign in on the computer
Sure. Yeah.
or log in? What term do you all use?
Again, this is Mr. Crane's area, but I would say sign in, log in. Either one would be appropriate.
Okay. Are you aware that Tiffany refused to sign in or log in with Mr. Crane on the computer on at least one occasion?
I don't recall that.
You recall that she had concerns about Brian Crane's competence.
She never said anything to me.
Do you know if she had concerns about numbers being changed when Brian Crane was operating the computer?
Again, she and I have never had a discussion along these lines.
Yeah. Did she inform you of any of her concerns of Mr. Crane and the operation of the election computer?
No.
Wad my jacket up and use that.
People always say I'm lumbering around.
Ready to go again?
Yep.
Waiting on you.
Okay. Ms. Nelson, do you know what testing Brian Crane did with the crop scanner?
I do not.
Did you ask him to do any specific testing with the crop scanner?
Specifics, no.
Do you know if anyone worked with him or assisted him or was aware of what he did with the crop scanner?
There was an election department employee at the time named Thomas Kalasinskas. I believe you've had testimony or deposition from him previously.
Do you know if he assisted Brian Crane in using the crop scanner?
I did not observe the procedures or processes they did, so it's an assumption on my part that he assisted.
And why do you assume he assisted if you have no information that he did?
When they both told me the outcome of whatever processes they did, he contributed to that discussion.
And would you describe for me when and where that occurred?
Just a moment, it's been some time. This is maybe in the area of 5 years ago. Within the elections department office, and it was not a written finding of whatever they've discovered. It was just a verbal exchange.
And what did they tell you they discovered?
Their endeavor was to prove or disprove as best as they could a memory card, for lack of a better term, attack that was communicated by an organization called Black Box Voting.
Called what?
Black Box Voting.
Thank you.
And what were they able to disprove in the black box voting report?
You'd have to talk to Mr. Crane about that.
And What were they able to prove?
Again, you'd have to talk to Mr. Crane about that as well.
Well, you originally read the black box voting report, did you not?
Bill, again, you already asked him about that, so just ask him something else.
Okay. What was it about the black box voting report of July 4th, 2005 that you read that caused you to desire to have Pima County purchase a crop scanning machine?
To discover as best we could whether the threats that were described in that report made from black box voting were things that Pima County needed to take into consideration for election integrity purposes.
And the threats were what?
Again, it's been some years now, but I believe the assertion in the black box voting report is that with a memory card that's used within the scanning system that Pima County and other jurisdictions have, that with a computer and an exterior device, you could change the programming on the memory card in such a way that it would be undetected.
And they proved that that was true, did they not?
You'd have to ask Mr. Crane whether that's true. His report to me verbally was some things within the black box voting report were valid, some were not valid, and others they could neither prove nor disprove.
Okay. So the what the black box voting report said, and let me know if I'm correct on this, was that by utilizing a read-write device called a crop scanner that was sold by Crop Scanner Inc., one could program the memory card to print false results. Is that correct?
That's their assertion, yes, in that report.
Yeah. And then that was one of the things that you wanted to know if that was true or not.
Correct.
Correct? And Mr. Crane, did he not report to you that in fact it was true that you could use the crop scanner device that Pima County purchased and program a memory card to print false results?
I think there is more to it than just that. So I have to give you a qualified answer that there is more to it than just having a laptop, crop scanner, and a memory card. There is more involved in the process, and you'd have to ask Mr. Crane about that.
Okay. But so you're the person who read the initial report, and you're the person who made the decision to find out if in fact this crop scanner device could be used to program their memory card to print false results.
Again, Bill, we've gone over this already. You already know the answer to that. You asked it before. Next
I know
question.
the answer. It's correct, right?
That's the reason we purchased the crop scanner.
Yeah. And then he reported back to you, and you don't recall whether he told you it's true that the very reason that you bought it, you don't recall whether he told you it's true that it can be done?
He said that you needed, again, you would have to get in touch with Mr. Crane for the specifics, but as he described it to me, again, this is 5 years ago, that there was much more involved than to have a successful attack than was outlined within the black box voting report. Much more.
And you don't recall what the much more was?
I believe that you needed to have the specific GEMS program, but again, please contact Mr. Crane along this line.
Did you ever see the movie Hacking Democracy?
No.
Never.
No.
Are you aware, do you know who Harry Hursty is?
I do.
And you already asked him about that too, Bill.
And have you heard the term Hursty hack?
You asked him about that too.
Yes.
And are you aware that in the black box voting report that you read, that was based on what Mr. Hursty said, that Mr. Hursty did not have a copy of the GEM software?
He may not have, yes. Others may have.
Yeah. But when he did his hack, all he had was a crop scanner machine.
I'm going to object, Foundation.
Isn't that correct?
I'm going to, just let me object,
Yeah.
Bill. I'm going to object Foundation to him testifying what Hursty knew or didn't know, or had or didn't have. Answer if you can.
I'm sorry, your question again, please.
Yeah, in the report that you read, it was based on Harry Hursty's work, was it not?
Correct.
And aren't you aware that all Harry Hursty had was the crop scanner, that he did not have a copy of GEMS?
I'm going to have the same objection, Foundation.
It's been 5 years since I've read the report, but I believe that was his assertion.
And are you aware that he was able to not only get to print false results, but to have GEMS accept those results?
That was in the report.
And this report was published nationwide, was it not?
Well, certainly it was available on the internet, yes.
Yeah. And did Brian Crane and Mr. Kalincensis report to you that they had disproved portions of what Harry Hursty and black box voting had asserted?
They did, but I can't remember the specifics.
Did you ask them to put in writing any of this information?
No.
Did you tell anyone else about what they had told you that they had learned?
I don't recall whether I had or had not.
At that time, were you president of an association of election directors in Arizona?
You went over that, Bill. You don't have to answer that, Brad.
Did you tell any of the other election directors in Arizona, or boards of supervisors, or whoever ran elections in this state, that the warning that had been sent out by black box voting had been disproved by your staff?
In objective form.
It was never a topic of discussion.
And there, in that period of time, would you agree there were 12 counties in Arizona that were using GEMS, the G-Bolt software?
That sounds appropriate.
And this was not this information disproving, in your mind, black box voting was not shared with any other election department anywhere?
From my office?
Yes. From you or your office?
Well, then I'm going to object Form and Foundation. Answer if you can with regard to yourself or anybody else.
Right. Certainly I did not communicate it to anyone else.
And did you give, do you know how long it took for you to find out that information? In other words, you ordered the crop scanner in mid-July 2005. Would you agree?
I think that's appropriate, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what period of time elapsed before Mr. Crane reported back?
I can't recall exactly, but probably less than 30 days.
Okay. So at that point, did your office have any use for the crop scanner machine?
After the test was concluded?
Yes.
No.
What did you do with the machine at that time?
You asked him that in his prior deposition. If you want to ask what's happened with it since then, no problem, but you already covered it in his prior deposition.
Would you agree that, according to your testimony, once you had utilized this machine for the testing, that it was surplus machine that you no longer needed at your department?
And if you're asking him what his prior testimony was, Bill, obviously you covered that already, so him agreeing with his prior testimony, I don't think that's a proper subject for today. You could just go through his whole deposition. Do you agree you said this? Do you agree you said that? Do you agree you said this? I think that the judge said you're supposed to ask about different things.
What was my question, please, if you would?
Would you agree that according to your testimony, once you had utilized this machine for the testing, that it was surplus machine that you no longer needed at your departments?
Can you answer that question?
Bill, what does his agreeing with his prior deposition have to offer that's discoverable?
He
under Rule
testified
20 under Rule
today. I'm talking about his
26?
testimony today. He testified that 30 days after he had the machine, the tests were over. So,
Okay.
would you agree, sir? 30 days after the machine, assuming that's the time period, that piece of equipment was surplus equipment that your office had no further need for?
I would agree with that.
Does Pima County have procurement rules of what you do with equipment when it's surplus?
You would have to, certainly the answer is yes. The specifics of it I couldn't tell you.
Did you give any instructions to anyone as to what to do with the crop scanner machine once, according to your testimony today, the testing had been completed and you had received the information that you wanted?
In that it was a piece of property that was purchased by Pima County, specifically the Elections Department. It was stored within the Elections Department.
And where was it stored?
And Bill, you already asked him about this. So ask him about something new. Ask him what happened since you talked to him about it last. You don't have to answer that, Brad. He already asked you that. Don't you want to know where it is now?
At what point did your election department give up possession of the crop scanner machine?
I don't have an exact date. It's been a very, very long time ago.
And your lawyer would like me to ask, so what happened to the machine, Mr. Nelson?
It was provided to Dr. Moffat. I'm not certain the exact date. And then at Mr. Huckleberry's direction, I believe, again, you'd have to contact Mr. Huckleberry or Dr. Moffat, but is my understanding that the Sheriff's Department destroyed it.
And what was the point of that?
You'd have to ask those gentlemen,
Was it a good machine?
as far as I know.
Yeah. Do you know if it had a value?
I do not.
And do you know why it would be necessary to destroy a machine Pima County purchased?
You'd have to ask the people who asked for the destruction.
Yeah. And so you gave it to
Dr. Moffat.
Moffat. And did Moffat tell you how the Sheriff's Department had destroyed this thing?
I think in just a casual conversation, I believe it was actually somehow put into several pieces. Now, whether it was sawed in half or hit with some heavy device, I have no idea, but it was smashed.
Did you get a report back on it?
Mr. Huckleberry or Dr. Moffat may have.
Okay. Do you know if any corn farmers are now short one machine?
I haven't heard from him.
Okay.
you report, do you still report just to Chuck Huckleberry?
Yes, I'm his direct subordinate.
Yes, and what did you say?
I'm his subordinate.
During your tenure, have you reported to deputy county managers?
When I was first hired, yes.
Yeah. Who did you report to when you were first hired?
Martha Durkin, Durkin.
Have you reported to any other deputy county attorneys?
No.
Do you now, have you reported to Martin Willett at any time?
No.
What relationship does your election division have with Martin Willett?
None, except in his capacity as acting county manager when necessary.
And what does, what do you mean by that?
In other words, if Mr. Huckleberry is unavailable through whatever incommunicado, then I would go to Mr. Willett as his chief deputy.
Do you know what his normal responsibilities are in the, as a deputy county attorney?
I do not. And is that a deputy county attorney? to my
I mean
knowledge?
deputy
County
county
manager.
manager.
No,
You don't know, right?
I do not.
Are you aware of what his training or background might be?
I do not.
Have you ever gone to him for legal advice?
No.
Has I have previously asked you about whether or not there's been any investigation of the election department or the election department security by the Board of Supervisors. And you answered those questions. So my question now is, since you answered those questions, has there been any investigation that you're aware of by the Board of Supervisors of your election division?
Investigation, certainly there's the Election Integrity Committee that oversees some of the processes we do, but I would not use the word investigation.
Has the Board of Supervisors made specific requests of you?
No.
As of today, what individuals have the ability to sign on or log into the election computer?
I'm going to answer this a little convoluted. Certainly there are certain administrative functions that elections personnel are not allowed to do as part of the integrity processes that the county has put in. For example, if when we need to do the database release for the political parties and other citizens post-election time, we actually need individuals from the IT department to come down and do a two-part password to get through the first layer of security before individuals from the elections department go on to do their two-part password to actually get to Jim. So I think that may answer your question. I hope it does. If not, please let me know.
All right. Within your election division, what individuals can log on to the computer?
To the Jim's portion of the computer, Brian Crane, Tom Quigley, and Vanessa Eastlis, I believe is how her last name is pronounced. YSLAS, I believe.
So there are three individuals currently employed by the election division that can log into the computer.
To Jim's, yes.
To Jim's, yeah. what can't those three log into? I want to make sure I understand the distinction.
I understand your question, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what the restrictions are that they can't log into. I know they can get to gyms, but other things, such things as simply setting the clock on the computer. Everybody's used to having that clock down in the corner of their monitor. They can't even get to that without IT coming and doing something, because that's not part of the gym software. But where those lines are drawn, you have to ask either someone from the county's IT department or Mr. Crane.
What else is on that computer other than gyms?
That's it.
So then how can there be a clock that's not part of gyms?
No. There's a clock that's part of all operating systems, but it's not connected to anything, so it begins to lose time.
How long has Mr. Quigley been there, do you know?
As a full-time employee, probably less than a year. He was a seasonal employee probably for 2 years prior to that.
Do you know what his background is?
Military, but I don't know what aspects of military.
Do you know if is he a friend or neighbor of Brian Crane's?
I know that they live on that side of town, but where the relationships of their homes are, I have no idea.
How long's Vanessa Islas been there?
The same employment length of time as Mr. Quigley, so she's been a full-time employee for almost a year and a seasonal for about 2 years prior to that time.
Do you know what her background is?
Degree from Arizona State University in business, but what her speciality is, I don't know.
Did she replace, or Tom Quigley replace Tiffany in terms of the job function?
You'd have to ask Mr. Crane that question, since he's the supervisor of that particular aspect of elections. I'm not certain, as I mentioned before, I'm not certain what Tiffany's duties exactly were, so I don't know how they may be divided up now.
Let me ask you this then: what role did Brian Crane play in the hiring of those individuals?
Trying to remember. I don't think any. My recall is that he wasn't even on the interview board when we interviewed those individuals for the position, but I could be mistaken on that.
Well, what is your process there for hiring employees such as Mr. Quigley and Vanessa?
And certainly there has to be a job vacancy that's advertised through the Pima County's HR department. They have a certain amount of minimum qualifications that they have to meet. As they turn in an application with the Human Resources Department, the Human Resources Department determines whether the applicant has met those minimum qualifications. If so, then those applications are forwarded on to my office for us to make a pool of people who we wish to interview.
So, when it's in your office, for instance, when these employees were hired, what does your office do to pick who gets the job?
Well, certainly there are a series of questions that are asked in an interview. We ask the same questions of all applicants, and then based on the score, so to speak, from those interviews, we make a determination as to who's the best fit for the position.
Did you interview those individuals?
I was part of the interview process.
For both of them?
Yes.
Yeah. How many people were part of the interview process?
I'm sorry, I don't recall. I know Ms. Ariza, then she was married, so her name was Estrada perhaps at the time. But I believe she was there as the HR representative. But I can't remember who else was in the room with me.
Okay. These people were hired within the last year or two?
For their full-time positions that they have now, I think they're just coming up on a year.
Okay, how about when they were initially hired and interviewed? How long ago was that?
For their seasonal positions, my gosh, that was maybe 3 years ago.
And is that the board that you're talking about, that Isabel Arisa participated in?
The 3 years ago, or a year ago?
Tell me. I just want to know
Well,
what the process is.
when they applied 3 years ago, it would not have been for the job title that they have right now. It would have been for a job title known as elections aide.
Yeah.
Okay. So those individuals, as well as many individuals who come on as our seasonal employees, come on as elections aides. When the current positions came open, individuals were able to apply, and those individuals got the position. I really don't recall the process. I'd have to go back and refer to my notes.
Has Isabel's last name, does she use a different last name now?
She is married, and her last name is Estrada.
Do you know her husband's name?
I can't remember his first name, I'm sorry.
So when both Tom and Vanessa were election aides, correct?
Correct.
And they both applied for a full-time position, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. Do you know how many applicants there were for those positions when they applied?
No.
And there's an interview for the full-time position, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. And was that the interview that Isabel sat in on?
Yes, I believe so.
And you and Isabel, and do you know of anyone else?
As I mentioned previously, there were other people in the room, but I can't recall who it was.
Does Brian sit in on something?
I don't believe he did. I think he was part of the formulation of the questions that were asked, but he was not part of the interview process.
Was Mary Martinson part of the group?
Could have been.
Do you maintain records in your office as to who participates in those hiring boards?
Sure.
How Tiffany Richardson, do you know how long she worked as did she start out as an aide, or?
No, she came on as a computer land support specialist, or whatever the job title was at the time. And she was one of, I want to say, 4 applicants for that position.
Okay. And do you know what period of time she worked for y'all?
Again, I think she left about 2 years ago, so she would have been hired about a year previous to that. So about 3 years ago is when she would have been hired.
What's the period of probation for employees?
1 year.
So, did I understand you that she didn't, prior to the 1 year, you let her go?
That is correct.
In 2006, did you change in February of 2006 the procedures as to which persons would be permitted to be in the computer tabulation room?
I can't remember the exact date, but certainly around that year there were some changes as who had access to various parts of the office.
Yeah. What were the changes?
Within the room that contained ballots, the gem servers, there was a combination lock put on the doors, also audible sirens, alarms, if you will, when the door became open, things of that nature.
And what motivated the security changes?
As I referred to previously, the elections procedures manual basically restricts access to the counting center. Previously, it had been very much open. However, in accordance with common sense as well as the procedures manual, the access to the counting room was restricted.
Okay. So is it your testimony that in February of 2006, or around that time period, you made changes in the security procedures of the election computer room based on changes in the Secretary of State's manual?
and Bill, I think he said it sometime that year. He did say around February, but answer as best you can.
Certainly there needed to be an increased awareness of who had access to the room and who did not, because we had ballots in that room. So it's almost like a bank having money in a vault. You got to restrict who has access.
My question, Mr. Nelson, related to the Secretary of State's manual. I asked you whether your motivation for those changes was based upon changes in the Secretary of State's manual.
Not solely, no.
Were any changes based on the Secretary of State's manual?
Certainly.
Okay. Which changes?
Well, some of the things that I've already mentioned is that we've got to maintain accuracy of where the memory cards, who has possession of them, things of that nature, the ballots themselves. So,
Okay. No, I want to be specific because I want to make sure that I understand you, sir. I understood your answer as saying that the changes you made in 2006, and this was prior to the RTA, would you agree?
I can't remember the time frame. But changes were made, I just can't remember the time frame.
You can't remember if there were changes made prior to the RTA election. You can't remember that.
No. I can't remember the date that they occurred.
I'm not asking you.
Or in reference to the RTA, whether they were made before or after.
Well, we've had information that there were changes made, that you had a staff meeting, that you made changes, I believe it was in February, but prior to the ballot definition work preparing for the RTA election. Do you recall whether you made any changes prior to the RTA election?
I do not.
There were changes, of course, made, multiple changes prior to the primary and general election in the fall of 2006. There's a whole memo on those changes, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, excluding all of those changes, you can't recall if there was any changes you made as to what persons could have access to the computer room prior to the RTA. Are we clear in that?
Changes were made, I don't know when they were made.
Changes were made during the year 2006. We're all sure of that.
Okay.
My question is, prior to May 16th, are you aware of what changes were made?
I can't recall.
And do you believe that any changes were required prior to May based on changes in the Secretary of State's manual?
Now you're talking 6 years ago. I will not be able to give you specifics, but I think with the advent of the Help America Vote Act and everything else that was coming down at that time, that there were many changes within the elections procedures manual that were part of the decision to come up with the directions I made.
Repeat that again.
Sure.
Can you just read it back?
I will not be able to give you specifics, but I think with the advent of the Help America Vote Act and everything else coming down at that time, that there were many changes within the elections procedures manual that were part of the decision to come up with the directions I made.
When was the Help America Voting Act passed?
I have to remember when President Bush signed it into effect, but also there was also a state equivalent of the Help America Vote Act as well. In 2006, I believe, is when the state was involved in what its process was with Adios Chad, getting rid of the punch card. So there were numerous changes.
And that's ADIOS. It's like adios. Adios, Chad. CHAD.
There were numerous changes within the procedures manual that affected not just Pima County, but all counties.
Well, Pima County had gotten rid of their punch cards how many years prior? So,
Probably 8 years prior, it was before my time.
so I think we
I'm
get
sorry,
it.
what was the answer?
About 8 years prior was before my time.
So we can exclude any changes in Pima County that you made in 2006 as a result of getting rid of punch cards.
A qualified yes to that. Certainly the procedures manual changed for all jurisdictions, whether they were already on optical scan or not.
Well, do you think you made any changes in Pima County's procedures, you in 2006, based on punch cards that Pima County got rid of 8 years before you took the job?
No, that's not what I said.
What'd you say?
I said because of the Help America Vote Act and its advent. And
Do you know when the Help America Vote Act took effect?
I do not remember the date.
It was well before 2006, wasn't it?
I don't think it was well before 2006.
Wasn't it years before 2006?
You tell me.
Well, I think it was passed after the problems in the 2000 election in Florida that Congress passed the law.
Okay.
So I think it's well before.
All right.
Does that ring any bells with you?
No.
Okay. Let me ask you about early boards. Do you select the members of early boards?
Early what?
Boards.
I think we need to make a distinction. Certainly there may be early boards within the recorder's department as well as early boards within the elections department as well.
Yeah. So does your election division constitute early boards?
Yes.
And describe what those early boards do.
They'll receive the verified ballots from the recorder's office, remove them from their envelopes, and prepare them for count.
How many persons serve on early board?
Depends upon the complexity of the election and the volume of the ballots, but it could be probably about 20 people.
How are those individuals selected?
Based on their party affiliation, there has to be a mix of Republicans and Democrats on each one of the individual boards.
Who selects who serves on those boards?
We do. Certainly the political parties are invited to, as well as they're invited to select poll workers who work at the polls, but they never give us a list, so we have to do what we have to do.
So can political parties give you a list and say, these are people that we want to serve on early boards?
Yes.
And they do or don't do that?
They don't. What they have done in the past is they'll provide their observers to watch the board's work. That has happened often.
Yeah. So the actual composition of the early boards is determined by your office.
And the party affiliation of those individuals, yes.
Right. So there needs to be, is it a half and half between Republicans, Democrats? How is it
That's
split up?
Yeah, that's basically how it's done.
So, so there would be 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats.
Approximately, yeah.
And how are these 10 identified? Are these people who have worked in the past? How do you come up with who those 10 are?
Predominantly, they are people who have worked in the past for us.
And of that pool of people, how large a pool are we talking about?
There's probably 30 people in the pool, I would guess.
And describe for me what you need, what the qualifications are to be in the pool.
What usually happens is word of mouth from individuals who are serving on the boards already will say, hey, this particular person isn't able to be on the early boards anymore in the future. If you know somebody who would be interested in this kind of work, because it is arduous, long work, and so we need an individual to go out and solicit people to come and help us. We also just put out job ads from time to time as well to get, again, the election aides, that seasonal position for people to help us out as well.
So do some of these people have recommend other members of the family to work on the boards?
It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, does that happen?
I'm sure there are some relatives there. I'm not certain.
You know, if some of those individuals switch parties from time to time to make sure that they're a split as to what parties people are in.
I understand your question, but to my knowledge, that's not occurred.
Yeah. So you're not aware of someone having been a Republican and then working on an early board later and being a Democrat or a Green or some other party?
They may have, but I'm not aware of it.
But in any event, the composition and the individuals that are on that board are selected by the election division, and the requirement being that there needs to be a balance of parties.
Yes.
Does Pima County handles elections for other for school districts and small towns within Pima County, do you not?
Intergovernmental agreements exist between the county and those jurisdictions, yes.
Other than the city of Tucson, does any local jurisdiction run their own elections?
Some of the tribal governments run their own elections. But other than that, I think the answer is no.
And these intergovernmental agreements, do they, how does Pima County bill for its services?
There's a separate intergovernmental agreement between the Pima County Board of Supervisors and the jurisdiction.
So, if with the two-person rule, if those two people decide to cooperate and cheat on an election, what's to prevent that?
Well, certainly there's the availability of the databases that we're turning over to citizens and political parties at this particular point in time. And at the time that we're tabulating ballots for the Election Integrity Committee, members have been there in the past since it's authorization by the board. So there are individuals there that can look at this screen at exactly what it is that they are doing.
Okay. You said there's a database to political parties?
Right.
You know about that.
In the wake of Judge Miller's decision.
And what else? You said there's a screen that...
Right. In other words, as political party observers, or even individuals of the public who come to watch tabulation or whatever we're doing in that room, we can turn a monitor in such a way as that, so as Brian Crane, perhaps with Tom Quigley, is working on something on gems, you see exactly what it is that they're doing on this screen. It's not like, I don't know what he's doing because that monitor isn't facing this direction. You do get to see what they're doing.
Okay. Can you think of any other safeguards we've got?
Well, certainly to a degree, the hand count on it may be as well.
How about safeguards for county races? Your bosses.
You said your bosses?
Yes, in other words, the Board of Supervisors runs the election. When they run, their races aren't audited. That's what I mean by your bosses, and I wasn't talking to Jeff Huckleberry there.
Did you say I am or I'm not?
I was not talking to Jeff Huckleberry. I was speaking of the bosses being the responsible parties as opposed to...
With the exception of the database transfer, I don't think there would be, but I'm uncertain.
And a database transfer, you're talking about something that is given to the political parties after an election has been canvassed and approved by the Board of Supervisors.
That's correct.
And how can anyone take that database and find out whether cheating has occurred?
I don't know the answer to that.
You know, I think that's all the questions I have.
Great. We'll read and sign.
Do you need a copy of the chair?